I'd like to thank everybody for being here, and I did do a put a poll into the system just to get an idea of familiarity with the whole idea of community engagement. And I saw I got some mixed responses to people not being aware of it, to people aware of it but never use it, and those that do use it. And I also noticed in the attendance that I got a good breadth of disciplines here. Because, and can everybody see the screen change on that or not? Is that working?
Not yet. Can you give me a quick minute to
Oh, I'm
just go
sorry. I thought I was in
That's
control of
okay.
that.
That's okay.
So
I'd just like to go over the housekeeping before we begin.
okay.
So I do want to begin by welcoming everybody to this session on using community engagement to increase the relevancy of course and program content. Thank you so much. My name is Sita Natarajan, and I will be the moderator for this session. A few housekeeping tips that I'd like to go over. Please note that all microphones and video cameras are muted during this session, but we encourage you to chat and communicate with us using the chat functionality within Zoom. If you have any questions, kindly post them in the Zoom Q&A area. You can access that by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom on the bottom panel of your Zoom window. This session is being recorded, so all attendees will receive information about how you can access these recordings after the summit has concluded. I do not wish to take any more of our presenters' time, so I'll hand it over to you, sir.
Thank you. And just to give some backgrounds, I think that's important to understand because a lot of our teaching is based on prior experience, based on our training, and the very busy looking slide here is based on a history of me being involved in professional engagement, but also within my profession of environmental sciences, of part of the curriculum I went through my master's and PhD was taking my content and using it within the community. And it was not as easy as just going out and volunteerism, doing volunteerism or doing service. It actually meant engaging my knowledge with the community, educating a community, and then looking at resolutions. This particular presentation I do regularly, at my college. I also encourage a lot of my colleagues at Kingwood to do this, but also I do this with various professional organizations, and also I do myself as a scientist volunteering. Next slide, please. Okay. So the premise of the program that I use with my students, it's based on a model I've developed with a group called On-Call Scientists, which is not as familiar as the name as Doctors Without Borders. There's actually group Psychologists Without Borders and mathematicians, statisticians without borders, and I don't know about other disciplines. These are just people that I've interacted with in the past. And our goal is to use our discipline content knowledge in a volunteer situation to work with communities, governments, individuals, even on connecting our discipline to resolve social issues. And even if it's just involved in public education, I'll talk about that because this is when we look at community engagement, it's a very broad topic. So I'm not the creator of this, but part of my job with what's called the On-Call Scientist program is to teach other faculty, and not just my discipline, but other disciplines, how to train students. Particularly, we work with high school and a lot of two-year college students, not just university students, with looking, at least in my discipline, resolving human rights issues. And I've also worked side by side, believe it or not, with mathematicians, statisticians, and even artists on engaging community in using the different disciplines to promote or engage people in human rights and environmental justice. Okay, just again to look at the whole idea of student engagement. I was never one for what I call just passive dissemination of information, and I was not a good person at receiving that. I only understand content from the point of using it in realistic applications. And I'm not saying it's wrong just to apply content just for the sake of applying it, because that's important as a beginning and a practice, but also to engage content in real world situations. When I started using community engagement, I started to notice that my students became particularly more interested in the content. They show more interest, more measures of relevancy of the content to their everyday life or to life in general. And it tends to become sometimes a very student-centered approach where the students or they are part of the engagement, their knowledge, their planning, and their design of projects, whether it's direct contact or indirect contact with what I'm going to call, at least for now, stakeholders or community people. So when we look at community engagement, this, in at least the world that I work with in community engagement, is the process of faculty, students, working collaboratively with individuals or groups of people with, outside of the college. I mean, we could also do internal community engagement too within the college, which we do at Kingwood with our annual health and wellness fair, but also just engaging the public in what are some public needs. And again, this is not just going out and saying we're going to fix people. This is interacting with the community to work on collaborative projects where the stakeholders are engaged. So usually what we work with is people affiliated with geographic proximity. That's very important for us, for the students, a specific topic that matches the content of my course, again, to add to course relevancy. And also I pick situations that for engagement, a lot of my students are involved in. A fair amount of my students live in environmental justice areas or areas where there's some type of inequity, and they find that by applying the content of my course to these situations, again, adds relevancy, it keeps students engaged, and it also, to believe it or not, keeps students attending. And I'm not going to say it raises grades. That's one thing that is difficult in this area. It doesn't necessarily improve content knowledge, but it does improve students' critical thinking using content, because I find them looking up things a lot of times in these projects, and that's fine because eventually they do retain some of the content. And I'm in a very content area course, so I don't expect them to remember everything. But the importance of this is it involves coalitions. It involves, how students not only use content, but how do they use their resources, community resources, and problem solve and get feedback. Because students don't always get feedback from outside of a project. They get my feedback on assignments and other things, but they don't really get feedback from peers, from other people about things that they're doing. And I hope the slides are advancing and everybody's seeing what I'm saying. So to be honest, community engagement as a practice, it's not for everybody. It does take a lot of my time, and I've actually worked myself into a mode of how to do this now, preparing a semester ahead of time. But there's basically two major phases to doing this, and I could always consult later after this presentation because it's really not much time to discuss a topic like this. So I'm available afterwards to do project consulting, but it involves two major phases: the student preparation phase, in which you're preparing the students by way of syllabus, course description, what is going to happen in this classroom. And usually this is going to be a semester-long project where students are going to be given time in class, and also they know there's going to be time outside of class where they have to collaborate. And I've done this in face-to-face and in online classes. To be honest, online classes, I'm a little more selective about projects. And sometimes I end up doing just indirect projects where the students are actually almost acting like consultants that are meeting the needs of the community, feeding them information rather than meeting with the community itself with a direct engagement. There's also a project development phase, which, to be honest, as a faculty member, is a very difficult phase, a very frustrating phase, because I'm trying to teach students how to manage a project. And I mean, I know how to, but getting the point of students learning about deadlines, learning about being in touch with stakeholders, how to communicate adequately, how to get feedback, for students how to communicate with each other in a project using some type of digital medium or whatever medium they're comfortable with. And the thing that's frustrating too is it's a dynamic project. So students have to learn when they're planning, they have to make adjustments and constantly go through redesign and sometimes drop some really good ideas. And then the students have to also learn that there is a closure, and the closure might be part of the project. Some of my projects take a year to continue, and sometimes the students feel frustrated that they only contributed to one phase of it or one part of it, and that someone else is going to, finish it up later. So, and what I'm going to go through basically just to give you an idea of what I do, so you have some tangibles rather than me just throw theory at you, and then I could answer some questions, is I'm just going to give you some projects, how I get involved, how I get students engaged, and sometimes the serendipity of finding a stakeholder. So I received an email from some of my lists about student STEM opportunities. And one of them was from National Public Radio about getting students to become amateur journalists on looking at particular issues in their community or issues in general, or issues that are important to students. And at the time this came out, the Flint, Michigan situation came up about water quality. And my students in Houston were saying, do we have water quality issues like this? Are there areas like this? And I thought I basically contacted NPR and volunteered to basically have my students produce a mini documentary or journalistic piece on the Flint, Michigan water crisis. So the basis of the project was the students to take this information, sift through what is accurate, what is not, and what is the impacts of the crisis on people, and how do you generalize it to other communities. So it's not just Flint, Michigan, but this is a situation that could appear anywhere. So the students literally wrote a journalistic piece. You can see a copy of the video that went live on at least the KQED in California radio station or TV station. And the students came up with something that was accurate, relevant, applied their environmental science background, but also, forced them to also look at the social issues and the generalizable issues of something like that. I mean, today I would not use a Flint, Michigan example, session for my students or example, because it's not relevant, but back then it was, and it was in all the news. So this was kind of an easy start. It was almost handed to me, but also it did include management by the students, content review, students doing peer review, and eventually getting feedback from NPR itself on what is legitimate journalistic writing, what is accurate, and how do you convey this verbally and also visually. And the project, I think, turned out to be a great success. And we've presented on this, and the students even got an honorable mention for this at a conference. So it was really kind of neat, and it was really something for students to see their content knowledge becoming alive. The thing I run into when doing a project like that is looking for student motivation. And that's why I'm kind of taking a step back, because in my class, I had students that were affected by water quality, students that were living in environments very similar to the Flint, Michigan situation. And I have students that care about the environment, some don't. So when I'm working with my class, I'm constantly trying to get to know them individually and getting to know their stages of, where they are on, Maslow's hierarchy as far as looking at social issues and understanding them, and what's their relationship to helping other people. So when we look at this hierarchy, if I have students that are relating to people in that situation, they're very more likely to become engaged, and they're more also likely able to take this content and maybe apply it to their own situation. I do have students that are really not interested in a particular topic, or so distant from that type of topic, they don't even know where to go or how to feel empathy for the people they're working with. So a lot of this takes background, knowing your students, and also knowing how to team students. And I hope I'm not discouraging people from doing this, but sometimes I let students even self-select in a group or self-select what part of a project they feel they're going to be more interested in. Like I have some students, again, that cannot relate to that situation, but they end up very good at doing data analysis, becoming editors or whatever. And each student we learn as this project goes on, students learn each other and learn how to put students in roles that eventually, facilitate team building and collaboration. So some projects can be simple, and this is another indirect project. This was one of our more primitive ones. We took a STEAM approach for educating the public in a couple of ways. One engagement project we did was working with a group called the the National Marine Sanctuaries Program. I was on the board of directors for a marine sanctuary through National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. So it gave me a connection with the needs of public education about the Gulf of Mexico. And we were having an open house at the college, and my students thought it'd be interesting if we can do an open house display, like you see there in the graphic on just starting simple on the impacts of our human behavior on the health of the Gulf of Mexico, and why the health of the Gulf of Mexico is important economically, and particularly to underserved communities and certain and other communities that are dependent on that economy. So, and how it literally scales up into other sectors of the economy. So this was one section of a series of dioramas that the public walked through, and we've even invited schools to come up and look at our exhibit, and the students visually use their content knowledge and also understanding of informal ed to make these exhibits. And we did something similar with a former faculty member who was in Uganda doing work with a group called the Batwa people, who were displaced from their community due to basically land issues from their country. And students at first had trouble relating to people, literally indigenous people of Uganda, but students could relate to what it's like to be displaced after a natural disaster. So we capitalized on Katrina and Rita and other situations that they could relate to for this issue. And what the students did again was a visual, but this was bigger. We hosted this in our art gallery and made it partially a traveling exhibit. So this was a 2-semester project where we had students that designed literally a museum exhibit, came up with all the content, even invited the author through Zoom to communicate with Uganda. We even talked with the Batwa people. This was really kind of cool. And those students then laid the foundation for the building students. So my second semester students built all the dioramas, all the artwork, and worked with an art gallery coordinator to design this exhibit. And the neat payoff for the students was that not that they did do good, but they also the students made this generalizable to things going on in our area, locally, regionally, and nationally. Plus the students got a visit from the American ambassador from Uganda and from Congo, which is nearby, that is dealing with a similar issue with displaced Batwa people. So these are the things students can do, either indirectly, directly engaged. And this sounds elaborate, but once the students get into these projects, they buy into it. And they even ask me for more time off. They say, give us homework. We'll work at home, and in class, we want to work on the project. Some other projects we do, and we do a lot of water awareness. So recently, we just did a global and regional water awareness project in which students, again, we kept this simple. We use it as mostly a public education activity based on stakeholder feedback from various entities, NGOs that work with water quality. And the group said, this is what we would like done if we can make an exhibit. And the students have made various avenues, types of this exhibit in stages. So we've made an infographic exhibit that can travel to schools and has traveled to museums. We also, just like with the Batwa exhibit, we did a gallery exhibit on water quality, which is one of the best attended exhibits ever. And again, understand this was done on class time. So the exhibit you see here was done in a semester, working art students together with environmental science students and communication students on building an interactive museum exhibit with the quality that you see like in the Houston museums. Matter of fact, we had people from the Houston museums coming up to go through our exhibit, and we had nonprofit groups come in to look at the exhibits and even interact with the students and talk with the exhibits. So this is from my perspective as an environmental scientist of the projects that we do. And last but not least, sometimes we do community outreach by funding communities to be involved in their own pollution awareness or issues awareness. So we've provided water quality monitoring kits written from mini grants and also from grants from NGOs, and sometimes just money within my budget. So we loan out equipment of various types that communities can learn how to use the equipment and be involved in their own advocacy. As a matter of fact, one community was able to use the data that they collected to better control air quality from construction sites along 1960 in the Humble area. So communities were finding air quality issues totally related to the construction that were going 5 streets in, and were able to have the literally Department of Transportation, or I should say the contractors working with that, to do better methods of reducing the dust pollution. That was kind of neat. And it was not that difficult a project, because students just went, students that lived in that community basically went to their neighbors and said, here, I got these little things, these very simple things we can set up, and we can provide evidence of air quality changes in your area versus other areas. We actually ran controlled experiments. And you can see students even using different equipment that we can make to look at water quality traps. We actually we have a drone loan program too, where people could, within legal limits, look at different environmental quality issues, and even sometimes look at forest cover to actually measure forest cover and how deforestation in their area might be impacting rainfall patterns. So these are all things, again, this is specific to my discipline and something that I'm capitalizing on my skill sets to teach my students. What I'm hoping to do with this talk is basically get feedback from you about how does my discipline fit into this? And again, what are success stories or strategies for doing, again, what I would call indirect engagement with students, direct engagement students, and then how do we go about making these connections in the community anyway? So I hope this is kind of making sense, and I didn't rush too much into it, but I like to leave time for any questions. And I can't see the chat, so I'm going to cut the screen sharing. I see a hand up.
I do not see any questions right now.
Oh.
Either in the chat or the Q&A. I strongly encourage everybody participating to post your questions.
So I'd just like to ask in general, why, can I just leave this open mic and ask anybody, why did you attend this? And basically, what did you gain so far from this? Because I'm using this more as a now individual, looking at individual questions.
Please post your responses to the chat. The reason you chose to attend this session.
Okay.
We have one response. They say, I'm always brainstorming ideas for how to make my online class more engaging.
Okay, and that's, boy, when I started, because I've been using this in my my face-to-face classes. And what really threw me, and that's a great question, was I was thrown into the Harvey situation with Kingwood, and we had to go 100% online. And I did not want to take away this engagement piece, particularly online where it's difficult getting students engaged. So by having a project on this, where I can give students either I can provide students with a basically project that they can work at home on. either doing research or providing me with material development or whatever, but over that time span. But in an online setting, we're learning with community engagement that it can be done. It, of course, it has to be parceled out very carefully. But the thing is that I found, better participation in the class when I do this. And it's funny, and I get students asking more question about content because especially when we get to an area where the content is important to the project they're working on, I see much more communication. It also builds a community within the class too, because, with online students, I have so much trouble providing a community, making a community of students that want to get to know each other, want to engage. So within this class structure online, I give students the option of using what's called Flipgrid or Flip or Zoom. I give them Zoom links or Flip links, and they can do real-time chatting on the project. And this gets the students, again, a little more buy into the course because they're seeing other people, working with other people, and working with their colleagues. But the main thing is I see better persistence in the course. And when I look at how students are logging into the course, because I do that a lot, I say, who's logging in, who's not? When I have a community engagement project, whether it's just writing up a report, doing a journalism piece, anything, even simple projects, they are logging in a lot to my course to do that project. And that to me is engagement, not a person that just logs in to do an assignment and they spend so little time interacting with the D2L site. I hope that answered the
Collaboration does
question.
increase engagement, yes.
Yes, I mean, and I have measurables on that.
Yeah.
As I've presented this at different conferences of student engagement, but it does also elevate student, what do you call it? Darn, I forgot the English for it. Darn it. It does cause a little trepidation in the students too. So there is a little fear factor with this, and that the students are stressed by the project sometimes, but they're also stressed by tests. And it's funny, the stress of the project is probably less so than the stress of taking a test, because the students know with this project, there's correction factors in it that they can do.
They see application of what they are learning rather than just, rote memorization or knowledge acquisition per se.
Yes.
Trish Cagle, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. In the chat, she mentioned that I'm interested in building a project-based class in English. I've also worked with one of the LSE clubs, which did engagement and volunteer work. Service learning seems like a way of building these two together.
I'm sorry. Would you repeat that, please? The last part.
Yes, so Trish has mentioned in the chat about, I guess, why she's attending this session. She says, I've worked with one of the LSE clubs which did engagement and volunteer work. Service learning seems like a way of building these two together. And she's interested in building a project-based class in English.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because there's an overlap. It's like a Venn diagram thing. So there's an overlap between community engagement and service learning. So with the community engagement part, there's a little more, I don't know how to say this, I've done both, but with the community engagement, again, the engagement could be indirect. So you can get feedback from the community, but also you can provide a community resource that's open-ended. And I hope I'm answering that question, but
it's more like her, it's not a question, more as her comment on, I guess, why she's attending the session. Just feel free to clarify, or if you have a question, kindly post it.
no, but that's a good point. And what I would like some feedback on is how she feels as far as how she handles the situations, just to get it from another person, because I know I find it difficult. Because it is a lot of work, but also it's a lot of work to get students engaged.
Yes, it is.
And there's other ways of engagement. So
oh, she was just responding to my question, or rather the question I posed on your behalf. So yeah. All right. All right. I don't see any more questions or comments in the chat. So I do want to thank everyone for taking the time for this session. And I also want to mention that there's a quick session survey, and we would like to receive your feedback on the session. The session survey can be found on Whova. If you're accessing Whova through your browser, then please, under the session title, click the rate session button. If you're using your phone to access it on the app, then please click the rate button below the session title. And once again, thank you for attending, and we'll see you soon in the closing remarks.
And I'd like to thank everybody for being here, seriously, and I hope you got something out of it. And again, what I want out of this, if anybody has any questions or wants some help with this, email me, because there's a lot of discipline specific things you can do with vocational students. You can use this towards your SLOs. I apply it to my SLOs and our program learning outcomes. So it is a tangible way, again, to look to say I'm measuring engagement.
It's true.